Askreddit Asks, serious people who were in prison during 9/11, what was that like?
Wow, I have never heard anyone ask this before, and so many people don't believe this story that I don't even bother telling it. I was in prison during 9/11 in what was called high risk, but most people would understand maximum security. It was a 2-story section of cells where you went when you had been really bad in prison and gotten too many cases. We had been on complete lockdown for a while. No TV, no anything. The guards hated us because we were dicks and only came back there when they were required to. It was football season and we had been decently good, hoping to talk the guards into letting us watch a Cowboys game. This was maybe 2 weeks after 9/11. During the game they kept showing video of planes crashing into buildings. A guard was walking by checking on us and someone asked why they kept showing it. That's when we were told that we had been attacked a couple weeks prior. Don't really remember what I felt about it because even then we didn't know a lot about it.
It must have been pretty surreal once you were able to hear more about it. How long was it before you found out more? I was in prison, Australia, in my cell. At night, watching Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, the series, on the ABC, Australian Broadcasting Commission. At approx 830–845 p.m. the series ceased and live feed went up of the towers, etc. Checked out the other channels. All the same. People were calling out from their cells to tell people about it. My first thoughts, we were at war and here I am stuck behind 4 walls. Edit. 1. Yes, it's a series, URL redacted, wiki block. _stock 2, Perth, Western Australia. Albany Regional Prison to be exact. 3. I was locked up for a little over 3 months for common assault. I hit my ex-wife's new partner after he hit, not smacked, one of my children. So I hit him. Worth it. Edit 2. I would never have thought my highest rated comment would be about me being in prison. It's not something I tell people about. Edit 3. Goal. Really? Thanks Hugh, wayfaced slut. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for the kind comments.
I was in a max prison in Texas at the time. I was in the infirmary talking to the PA when a nurse came in and told the doctor that a plane had just crashed into the WTC. A little bit later she came in again crying, telling the PA that another plane had just crashed into the second tower. All 3 of us came out of the room into the lobby, where someone had rolled a TV in. We all watched the news broadcast. The people crying. Footage of the planes crashing. Everything. In prison, prisoners segregate themselves according to race and then by city. Then there's more segregation between prisoners and guards, nurses, etc. But at that brief moment, we were all standing there watching the TV and all those lines of separation were gone. When those towers were attacked, we were all attacked. We were all feeling sadness, worry, anger. I remember walking back to my building and everyone was quiet. Guards weren't giving us a hard time. Inmates were more quiet than usual. Just a dark cloud over the prison.
Removed.
Hey, a question I can answer. I had just recently arrived in the system after sitting in county for a while. So was still in diagnostics where all your processing like medical and affiliations and job placement stuff happens. I remember being still asleep when a guard turned on the lights and rolled the TV into the dorm. Intakes had been torn down by the last batch. Or maybe the batch before them. I remember my bunk was right by the plug. So I could sit there and be right to the side of the TV. My house was popular for a few days. Lol. Everyone was confused at first. What the hell, boss? Why are you waking us up? But his demeanor showed that something serious was up. Big gray-headed dude, usually jovial, was like, "Y'all quiet down and look at this. We thought it was just a crash at first." But he answered, "No, we're under attack." I'm not super sure about the timeline, he must have brought it on shortly after the Pentagon got hit. I remember seeing one of the towers fall. At least. But the memory is fuzzy. We were one somber bunch of hoodlums. Though, they left the TV in the dorm all that day. And most of the next. Like others have said, we didn't go out for a few days. We didn't go full lockdown. because they kept running the diagnostic stuff. But I can't speak for the rest of the camp. Among the inmates, it was gossip as usual. Hype to the walls. There's gonna be a war. They're gonna let us out. Gonna write my recruiter and get outta here. Blah blah blah. The couple Middle Eastern looking guys got some shit. But no beatings. At least in my pod. Again, stuck in intake so to know about the rest of the camp. There was perhaps an increased sense of camaraderie. And lots of talk from the veterans in the group. I guess I've never really thought about that morning from the perspective of anyone other than myself or a New Yorker before. Strange memory. Thanks for asking. Person.
Removed. Removed.
Removed. Removed.
Removed. Removed.
Removed. Removed. Removed.
Remove. Remove. Removed.
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 It was shortly after count had cleared and I had just walked outside to the yard before going to my job in the education department. The inmate I worked with asked me if I heard that we were at war and that they had attacked New York. I remember my belly was in a knot thinking, oh shit, we're at war and I'm stuck in here and my family is out there. I grew up in the 80s and remembered that Cold War fear that the Russians were gonna take over the country, so that's what I was thinking when I heard war. I was only a few years into a very long sentence, so I didn't know what to think. When we went into the classroom, we rigged the TV to catch channels over the antenna. We were all glued to the TV and I'll never forget watching people jump to their deaths. I called my folks and said we loved each other, and my dad reassured me that we weren't going to be taken over by another country. We had like 15 channels on TV in our units, and I remember every single channel had the news on even bet.
Removed.
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 I was in prison in Missouri at the time. Minimum security camp, Tipton. Even though there wasn't much of a security risk inmate-wise. When the planes hit, it was about 30 minutes later everyone was told to report back to our buildings. Temporary lockdown was in place. And the closest military base had fighter jets on patrol almost immediately. Even though we had to go on lockdown, almost everyone was already in a cubicle watching as the second plane hit. Holy fuck was about the most common expletive. As was that fucking real? Religious groups were the main concern. As there was a strong Nation of Islam and Muslim population. Luckily I was part of a multi-faith group, being with my main Wiccan group mainly. That spoke and shared beliefs, experiences, and sat in on each other's respective faith meetings and ceremonies. It was a very unique and interesting in-between sort of group and time for about a month after 9/11 happened. I like to think the openness, our eclectic mix of faiths possessed, helped bridge the gap between opposite groups and their response to such an extreme point in our history.
I was in prison from October 2000 to June 15, 2002. On June 3, 2001 I took my Shahada, became a Muslim. As a white inmate this was pretty difficult. I was the only white Muslim in the prison I was in. So there was some extra heat on me for that. But it had subsided. September 11, 2001 I was awoken by another inmate, turned on the TV and watched the second plane hit live while the first was smoking. We, the Muslim community, were all approached by the staff and were all offered protective custody status once they figured out it was a terrorist attack and Osama bin Laden was one of the masterminds. It was a very trying time. We would make salat, pray on the yard in the evening together. It was a scary time. We had a few meetings with outside ministers and imams where we all tried to come together and understand things. Sorry if this is off topic or overly personal. Feel free to ignore it. But why'd you decide to convert? How did it affect your life in prison and since?
I was 2 years into a 12-year sentence for attempted murder in a maximum security prison in Connecticut. Maybe 100 miles from where the towers fell. I was outside my cell block on my job assignment in a prison industry program when it happened. We were all signing out tools and getting ready for work when they called for the lockdown over the intercom. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary. prison-wide lockdowns happened occasionally for a variety of reasons, and in fact we were due for the annual prison-wide shakedown, so we all assumed that's what it was. As I was heading back to my workstation to gather up my tools, and dispose of my contraband lol, I overheard one of COs say that New York just got attacked and we were at war. I just assumed bullshit and went about my business, but it quickly became clear that something was up. The COs seemed panicked and they were rushing us out. I didn't even get a pat down on the way out. Normally if you're getting locked down because of a disturbance in the prison, the COs feel the need to be assholes to the guys that were just minding their business on the other side of the complex, but they weren't like that. They kept telling us to just get back to our cells and we'd find out what's up. I should mention here that most inmates had TVs in their cells. My cellmate and I arrived back at our cell at roughly the same instant. Immediately hopped on our bunks and stayed there glued to our TVs for the next 4 hours. I got back about 10 minutes before the second plane hit, and when it hit I remember being so shocked that something like that was happening so close to me that I looked out the window to make sure the world wasn't ending. So backstory on my relationship with the cellmate. This guy just moved in about a month ago. He was a crabby, complaining, confrontational African-American Muslim from New York City. I was a white boy from the country with a chip on my shoulder. Needless to say, there was your classic culture clash, and we butted heads a lot in the beginning but gradually settled into a mutual respect relationship and coexisted. Up until that day we hadn't spoken in about 2 weeks. I know people wonder how you can spend all day in a cell with a person and never speak, but honestly those are the best cellies. Try getting locked in a cell with a guy that's constantly bitching about his problems and you'll know what I mean. So that fateful day, after about 4 hours they brought lunch. My cellmate went out to get it and we broke our vows of silence over egg salad. I just remember him being irate that it happened in his city and heartbroken over the damage this would do to his religion. I didn't realize it at the time, but he was spot on with some of the stuff that he was prophesying that day. He was so apologetic for his religion. It was the first time I'd actually seen that miserable bastard vulnerable. We came off lockdown 3 days later and things went back to routine quickly, because that's how you get through a long prison sentence. Just follow the routine. My cellmate got his ass kicked over a card game about a week later and I thankfully never saw him again, but I credit him with the fact that I'm not one of those people that believe all Muslims are terrorists. There's one other thing I remember from the time right after that, and I'll add here that I am a Democrat, but George Bush was a fucking rock star in the immediate events following 9/11. I couldn't have been in a more culturally diverse environment, but everyone agreed that he was the man for the job and everyone was proud that he was the president. Say what you want about the man, but that's literally the only time in my life I've ever seen that.
For us, they shut down the yard. When we went inside, the TV was on, which wasn't normal for that time of day, so we all knew that something was up. Then we watched as the towers fell. They let those of us with fam in NY call them to check on them. Felt helpless AF.
Removed.
We didn't know what happened. We all thought somebody escaped. That's what the older prisoners told us anyway. No TV, no newspapers, no radio, no work. We were kitchen staff and served 2 meals per day, and we didn't have trays. Instead it was bagged lunch for everybody, PB&J and a carton of milk for 3 days. After the first 12 to 15 hours the older inmates were telling us, it could be a riot in another block. Because it was too quiet. Any stirs by the inmates, the loudspeaker would come on and tell us we are on lockdown. When we found out, 72 hours later, it was total shock. We were in California and we didn't know if our families were okay or what. I had to wait 2 hours to make a phone call to my family. I had to have my family in CA contact family in NJ and tell them to accept the collect call from me. I wouldn't take anybody's word that everyone was alive.
Remove.
We, like the rest of America, set aside our differences, which is the spirit of 9/11. That's a beautiful way of showing respect for 9/11.
Remove. Remove.
Removed.
Michigan Level 2. Medium security. I was laying in my bunk listening to Howard Stern on my AM/FM cassette player during count time. It was very weird. I thought he was doing some bit for a few minutes and was like WTF. IIRC, he kept his show going longer than it was supposed to, and I just stayed in my cell and listened. I don't recall if they put us on lockdown. Honestly, from what I remember, it was still fairly normal afterwards.
Removed.
Removed.
Removed. Removed.
Remove.
Removed.
I was serving 9.5 months and was 8 days away from getting out. I was in a dorm setting and we were allowed to use the phones early in the morning. One of my fellow inmates had talked to a family member and woke up the guy next to me and said, "Planes just flew into the WTC." That was pretty much all we knew. There was no sense of chaos or anything like that. I don't think we realized how bad it was until later that night. I just remember thinking, if shit really goes down, I hope it's after my release date. Not a fascinating story. But I remember for the most part it felt like it was just another day.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to support the channel, and above all, have an excellent day, you amazing people.